Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fun with Storyforms Part 2. All right, I think I'll just get into it. Last week, oh, turn this down. Last week we did three different story forms, and we're talking about the different ways that you can use the Storyform Builder here to set the genre of the story that you want to write. Meaning that genre is really dependent upon where you're setting the source of conflict in a story, and it gives you the personality of the story that you're trying to write. So last week we did the typical thing where you would put the objective story plot and you would classify it in the physics domain, which means uh, everything that goes in on the A storyline would be people coming into conflict over the things that they're doing. And if they stop doing it, then everything would go back to normal. But they're whatever it is that they're doing, punching, fighting, kicking. And then the relationship story balances out in psychology. And that's usually like the typical action adventure, sci-fi, Marvel comics, all that kind of stuff. That's usually the setup of the genre here, and it's what like most people would expect. The other thing we did is tried to flip it around so that if I put the objective story and instead put that in psychology, which I think I have to clear it first, then that flips the two of them so that the plot itself is about conflict coming into being over internal processes. So people coming into conflict over manipulations and scheming and doing all that kind of stuff. And then the relationship balances out by putting that in physics. So today I want to do the less prevalent sort of setup, which is when you put the objective story plot and that the focus in it is on fixed items. So whether or not that's fixed external or fixed internal. So I'm just going to set it to fixed external first. And you'll notice it doesn't move, and there's no little window that pops up and says, hey, I've moved things around. And that's because in the Dramatica model, the universe class is in the upper left-hand corner of the model. So that's why it just stays there. And because I already have objective story set there, it just leaves it there. And then mind, to balance it out, the relationship story will be a conflict over fixed internal states. In the past, this was always pitched as like they just argue over set mindsets. But you can really get a lot more mileage out of it if you look at the relationship and see how that's growing through, um, you know, growing through their fixed attitudes. And then so what happens is because we did this, that leaves the main character and the influence character, their domains of conflict have the choice between physics and psychology. So one will take up physics and the other one will take up psychology. What I didn't do last time is kind of give an idea of what that might look like in subtext. And I'm currently bringing subtext over to the platform, and it's actually going a lot faster than I thought, so it won't be that much longer. But this is another sort of visual representation of what you would usually see is the setup that we were doing last week, where the objective story here is in gray, and that's in the physics domain, the relationship story is here. And then we experimented with flipping those two around. And then the one I just set just now puts the objective story in the universe. And you'll notice every time I shift it around, it moves the other ones to keep this relationship where the objective story and the relationship story are across from one another, and then the main character and influence character are across from one another. And that's because the current model is looking at dynamic relationships and making that kind of like the most important thing. So it always makes sure that main character and influence character are balanced this way, and objective story and relationship story are balanced that way. So that's what it looks like in the model. And then I thought it might be interesting too, just to get a feel for what some films or stories where the objective story domain is in universe. So this is there's like 600 plus analyzed stories, films, novels, plays in subtext, and it's in Narrova. Narrova has all this information. It's just a little more visually uh, appealing here in subtext, or at least it's a little more visually obvious. So something like Chinatown's probably a good example of a universe domain narrative where it's not so much the things that they're doing that is the source of conflict, and more that there is an untenable situation, having a lot to do with the in some parts kind of the water rights and stuff in Los Angeles, but also a really like a weird sort of way of oh boy, how could I put this? Like people who are fathers of children who want to be fathers with the children. There's a weird situation that comes into play in China. In other words, it's like what's really going on. And the only reason I'm avoiding it is just for YouTube. And just, for people who might not understand what I'm getting at. But if you've seen Chinatown, you know that the big bad guy is trying to find his granddaughter. Is that right? Yes. Um, because, he would like to continue on his heritage, his lineage that way. So that's just like really yucky universe situation where, this person who is the father of this person shouldn't really be, and it's not a good thing, and it needs to be worked out. So, and that needs it's something that's fixed because he can't change that he's the father, she can't change that she's a granddaughter, the wife, or sorry, the daughter in between can't change that. Um, oh yeah, okay, I remember how it is now. So, anyways, it's a really yucky situation, and I try to avoid situation because everything is a situation. So it's a little rough to do that. You really just think of like the universe where there are these like fixed set things in the universe that just don't gel, but somebody's trying to make them gel. And that would be a universe domain. And it feels kind of like trapped, or it's just kind of like set into place. Another So that's one version of it. Another version of that genre would be like the fugitive, where they are tracking him down and trying to like get him because he supposedly killed his wife but didn't kill his wife. So the actual problem in the plot of the fugitive is this idea of somebody being unjustly accused, almost like labeled, that they are the guilty party when really they're not. So it's a label, that universe label that's been put there, locked into place, and the only way it gets freed is once that universe is put back together the way that it should be, or the way that it rightly should be. So kind of like unjustly accused. Shawshank Redemption has that same sort of feel to it, where they're all in prison, so that has that universe feel to it, but really about Andy being labeled the guilty party when really he's not. So, and it's less about the attitude towards that and more the fact that this is what we have determined, this is what it is, now you're going to jail for that, and then trying to escape that. So you can see it has a different feel than the ones we were talking about last week, which are really a little more easier to get. War movies are another really good example of how you can play with the two of them between physics and universe. So, for instance, Platoon is a film that it's much more about the state of war and about everybody being trapped in that place and whether or not they can break free, and all the different, just being in that universe is the inequitable part. Not so much that they're going to do a mission, and if they succeed in the mission, they win, right? So like Saving Private Ryan would be a war story where the objective story is in physics, right? So that over here would be over in physics, where Platoon is a war story that where it's much more about the state of war. So maybe let's play around with that. So if I go into the Storyform Builder and I have universe here, and like we did last week, I'll just set these two. I'm just going to lock them into place. And I think that's what I'll do for right now, just so soon. Maybe I'll put the, just for right now, I'm going to make the main character. One of the aspects in the dynamics here is whether or not that main character prefers to, on first blush, like just right out the gate, whether or not they prefer to solve problems externally and then maybe change themselves afterwards, or do they prefer to adapt themselves to the situation and then, then take action. So for right now, I'm just going to put the main character here as a doer there. And you'll see the Storyform Builder has gone ahead and based on the two choices I've made, which is the putting the centering the conflict of my story in universe, and then choosing that the main character's central approach will be to take actions first, that it has inferred that, okay, well, in that case, then the main character's domain of conflict is going to be physics, which makes sense. If I'm writing a story where my main character is somebody who prefers to take action, and clearly there's uh, inequitable uh, situation between the objective and subjective part of the story of the narrative between the main character and the objective story. So then, if they're a doer, then they're going to be doing things that if they would just stop doing them, then everything would be fine for them. But it's really the focus on being able to either do the things that they want to do better or to stop doing them, do them in a different way. And then the influence character to balance that out comes in over here in psychology, and they're very manipulative. So I think if I went back to Platoon, isn't that, or is Platoon the other way around? Let's see. It's been a while. So in Platoon, Chris Taylor is the main character, and the influence character is Sergeant Barnes. So you'll see, yeah. So he's very manipulative, and that's the challenge or impact on Chris, who is, just trying to survive, do the things that he has to do, or is really we get a first person experience of what it's like to do the things that you had to do in war. Whereas in the objective story, everybody's just mired down and not being able to move forward. And then their relationship between the two of them is very much their impulsive sort of stuff, their fixed beliefs. They're very stubborn, but then that's how their relationship grows. Um, so that is looking at Platoon. So now that I have these set, I can go ahead and copy this and then come into Narrova, and I'm going to do a war movie. All right, so let's say want to write a war movie, um, much more about the state of war and kind of the bigger picture and what it's like to be trapped in it. Um, I feel like I'm not guilty, I don't care is one of the best summaries. Yes. Oh, Hank, yeah. Um, from Fugitive, he's saying, I'm not guilty, I don't care is a complete, um, yeah, where's that Fugitive? I went into the Fugitive. Um, so the Fugitive here, Richard Kimball is the main character, Sam Gerard is the influence character. Same sort of genre setup that I just showed for Platoon, but yeah, their relationship story um, through their attitudes towards each other and their stubbornness begins with, I'm not guilty, I don't care. I'm not even gonna think about it, is like what's going on in here. And then they grow out of it in that relationship and almost like kind of become friends at the end. Um, so let's go back to this. I want to write a war movie much more about the state of war. Okay, what it's like to be trapped in it. I really don't know what time period. So give me 3 different time periods. Um, where war was a big deal. With this story form so far. And then I'm just going to paste in that story form from the Storyform Builder. So I have the main character approach a doer in bold. Those are the choices I've made. And then it goes in and puts the inferred choices. And just like we saw last week, there is one through line that's already determined what's going to happen in each act, just based on everything else. And also, for some reason, that the main character signpost too will be about learning. That's very specific. So what that is if I went to the Storyform Builder, the current state of the Storyform Builder, which is probably 90% accurate, just based on this sort of setup of conflict, if I go into signposts, you'll see already it's inferred that the second act, or 2A of the main character, that they're going to be learning something, or struggling with learning, overcoming learning, teaching people, and then the entire influence character through line has already been worked out. So that is a case of the awesomeness of Dramatica, which is able to convert kind of the spatial considerations of where conflict is situated in a narrative, and then you can use that to see what's going to happen temporally, so that you know ahead of time what each act is supposed to be about in a very broad thematic sense. Okay, but I have no dog in this fight as to what war to do, so let's just pick this, and um I guess that's okay. Let's see what it picks for me. So I'll send that up, and it should just go ahead and go through and just looking at those 4 domains. So a domain, if I go back to the domains here, this is like the domain of conflict. So we have the 4 through lines: the objective story, where's the plot; the relationship story, which is the heart of the story, um, the bond between two, and then 2 individual perspectives. One is the main character, which is the one that we get the first person perspective of, and their personal baggage, and then the influence character. Their challenge to them, you know, the you and I are both alike. That's what we're seeing here. Part of it is being seen here. So the you and I are both alike is they're both processes. Do you see how like universe and mind they're fixed? So that's the alignment, that diagonal. And this one they're more process. So that is the you know, we are alike. We're both processing, um, we're both experiencing conflict and inequity through processing. The difference is you're external and I'm internal. So that's one place where that you and I are both alike comes into play. All right. So what Narrova did is it went ahead and it picked the best agent for the job, which right now is the story forming agent, which is what we're doing. We're story forming. So that's what you're seeing here. And then it went through and did a whole bunch of thinking, which you can go through if you'd like to. You know, I need to act as a story form agent, but I don't see the ba-ba-da-ba-da. And it goes through and, you know, I want to emphasize the objective story domain of universe. It might be interesting to highlight specific conflicts like the siege of Leningrad or the Korean War. And it's just considering all the different aspects that I've set up so far with the story form. So you don't necessarily need to read this, but it's a good if you want to learn Dramatica and kind of learn the thought process. I That's why it's in here, so you can go through and read it. And it might get a little messy, you know, you might see some more technical stuff that's listed out, you know, like search story form examples. That's just different tools that the agent has that it can go out and access the 30 years of Dramatica theory that we've done so far. Um, and then what it'll do at the top is it'll write out kind of a plan, which again is a great way to learn the theory and to kind of get your head around what it is that the agent is actually doing. So it's kind of like that thing where it's like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. and then I'm going to tell you that I told you what I'm going to do. So that's what's happening in each of these turns. So you could read this, or you could completely skip it. The story form so far, which I already know, why these fit trapped in a war universe lets the war's conditions, like a siege, an occupation is a really good one, like Braveheart. You know, England is occupying; they're physically in this place, and then the objective story is if they could get them out, then there's no more conflict. So it's like I'm in this spot I'm not supposed to be, draft or borders, and then talking about the influence character, and then also the mind thing. All right, so the first one would be a World War I, which I would do, except there's been a lot of World War I lately. So like a trench stalemate, war becomes geography, trenches, mud, gas, and timetables, freeze everyone into positions. I'm trying to think if yeah, definitely 1917 is much more objective story in physics. So it's less about the condition of war and more, I've got to get to the front line by this day. Again, mission based, all the different things. And really, the whole one shot sort of thing is a very physics oriented way of being able to experience that. Whereas, um, not a farewell to arms. Is it a farewell to arms? The famous book, um, might be more universe oriented. All right. So the objective story in this would be less about, getting a message to somebody before there's a big, going over the top sort of thing, and more about how everybody's stuck in the trenches and they can't get out. Probably, I would imagine, what a lot of World War I stories are about. And then maybe the main character to fulfill that physics domain is like a fearless trench runner who is really good at hopeless errands. And then the influence character to balance that out, a chaplain, propagandist, or intelligence officer who reframes survival as a mental game. And maybe it's a thing where, the one of the other dynamics that's in a story or in a complete narrative is the resolve question, which is whether or not the main character is the one who alters their nature in response to a problem, or if it's the influence character that alters their nature. So maybe in that trench running one, maybe he would be steadfast, and it's the other guy who ends up going over the top at the end. So that's one. I feel like I've seen that before. That doesn't really excite me. So let's have fun. Let's see. Siege of Leningrad. Always like a good World War II. So this one would be the whole siege of, which is very much, between the Germans and the Russians, just locked in this trap that, and nobody's going anywhere, and it's really just starvation and just a horrible situation. A city literally encircled. War is weather and walls. The blockade is the problem, not any single battle. That's actually really good. Ration cards, road of life, ice convoys, frozen trams, art saved for museums. I actually quite like this. So then the main character might be a smuggler on the ice road, always in motion, and psychology. Party cultural officer. That might actually be good. And a relationship calcified by attitude. All right. I might go with this one. This is longer ago. Okay, 30 Years War. War isn't a front, it's an ecosystem devouring civilians. Occupation, forging armies, shifting banners, everyone is trapped in the way things are. Villages, mercenary companies, witch panics, forced billeting, Protestant and Catholic politics. Conscriptions, quartering, and contested borders, no neutral ground. I don't know a lot about this, but I kind of like this just to be completely different. And then it's great. It's just asking me to choose my battlefield. So I'm going to say, all right, let's go with, the 30 Years War, which I really don't know as well as I know the others. But that one actually sounds interesting and almost kind of timely, like modern day issues. So is there a way? Let's go with what was the main character? The main character was a forager, engineer, or courier building bridges, burning granaries, or moving men. Let's do an engineer building bridges, a courier. Well, I know what I really liked was the icy, charismatic Jesuit who manipulates loyalties and identities. I actually quite like that. So whatever MC complements that, let's go with that. And then yeah, and then let's make it Protestant Catholic attitudes for the relationship story. Obviously the Jesuit is probably the Catholic. And then yeah, help me define really what the OS is, since again I don't know the time period. Oh, and the other thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and make that what I was saying, where the main character is going to be steadfast, and then the Jesuit priest will be the one that changes. So, and I'm thinking the main character is the one who's right, who's like on the right path, doing that kind of stuff. So I'm going to do that, steadfast. And I wonder if I go to signposts. No, it's the same thing. All right. So really didn't change any of the signposts, and I didn't get anything out of that as that choice is there, but I do know that the influence character will be the one that changes. So, and yeah, I want to make sure that the MC resolve is steadfast. So let's go ahead and write up the 4 through lines, 1 paragraph each, so I can see what this story is about so far. And hopefully that gives you a good example or good idea of the difference between when you have a war movie that is much more about the things that have to get done. So actually, I think 1917 is a great example, and I think Saving Private Ryan, it's in the title, is very much in that headspace. Whereas the other stuff is much more about the the state of war. I think Thin Red Line, isn't Thin Red Line another one, which I think came out the same time as Saving Private Ryan. And you can just see the two different directors, right? Steven Spielberg, obviously very good at putting genre related films where the objective story is in physics, Jaws, Raiders, E.T., all that stuff, right? Whereas I think Terrence here, no, I was wrong. It's in the same place. Okay. No, it's the same. Less about the conditioning, but definitely it's in a much different headspace. Okay. Oh, that's one I would not have expected, but yeah, that is the same. Okay. So let's go back. So now I reframed the goal. I'm locking in the 30 Years' War with a charismatic Jesuit influence character, a complementary action-driven main character, a Protestant Catholic attitude clash for the relationship story, and a clear objective story that captures war as a trap. It's actually a good way to put it. Fixed external conditions. All right, so it's just repeating that. So then, in a border country carved up by passing armies, the state of war is a map problem. Forced billeting, contribution quotas, confiscated harvests, and a rolling bureaucracy of new banners each month. The populace is trapped by encirclement and paperwork, safe conducts, oaths of fealty. All right. I would like to know the countries. Our main character is an itinerant bridge right cartographer pressed into a Protestant mercenary train, a hands-on problem solver who builds pontoons by dawn and drops spans by dusk. keeping roads open. I like that idea because it was like building bridges between things. Roads are for people, not plunder. Okay. And then meanwhile, the influence character is a very persuasive Jesuit confessor attached to a Catholic regiment who treats identity like a tool. New names, so very manipulative. I kind of like that idea because you would expect the Jesuit priest to be amazing. Their bond is defined by oaths, catechisms, hearsay labels. Okay. All right. And then what it's doing is it's helping me step into the next step of defining the conflict in the story, which would be then to step down into um the, the concern and where the focus of the concern is in the objective story. Is it more like what's happened? Is it like what's going on right now? I'm not going to do that for this class, for this live stream. So let's do. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip over to the story reception agent. So this is the one who's really good at writing and providing, converting all the Dramatica speak and everything into something that's actually you might hand off. You probably still want to read through it and make sure that the report looks good. Essentially, like the reporting agent. So let's wrap up the above into a single one pager. Log line at top. Please define the countries at war. Since I still don't know that part. And then hint at the resolve of both characters, knowing that it will probably work out great at IMC, but I'm likely thinking that this will be mid 30 Years War, so that the war is just going to keep on going on and on. Keep it engaging and light and easy to read. So this will be less about checking all the Dramatica theory and much more about leveraging the AI just to put all of that together into a story. I probably should have gotten a title too. And even just going through and setting that set of so it's crafting the pages while it's writing that, even though I set this stuff, you'll still see there's 2048 different possible variations of this story. You know, I was thinking, the main character is going to resolve their personal problems. I could make it so that they don't resolve them. Outcome is definitely going to be failure in this case. All kinds of different ways of approaching it. Another one I just thought of that's like this is Beast of No Nation, um, which is about child soldiers in Africa. That's very much about them being trapped in that situation and what the children have to go through and how they're brought up and the fact that they can't escape that. This is a really clear one of what that feels like. And then, again, the main character, the kid, has to do things that he usually wouldn't do. And then, of course, Idris, the influence character, the commandant, is completely manipulative. That's like his whole thing is he lives in the realm of psychology. If you ever wanted to know an influence character in psychology, watch this. It's a fantastic film. Um, so that's another one that's in that set. All right, so it completed the story reception. Again, it's just listening out what it's going to do. In a ruined border country during the 30 Years' War, a Protestant bridge-right pressed into a mercenary train fights to keep roads open for townsfolk, while a charismatic Jesuit who reshapes names and loyalties to spare lives tries to pull him into a softer war of masks. Their stubborn faiths collide as fresh banners roll in, and the county is eaten mile by mile. That's really cool. Oh, who's fighting who? Sweden and a patchwork of Protestant German principalities. I don't know who would buy this if you're trying to be sellable. Although I don't know if anybody buys anything anymore, but it's definitely something that I haven't seen before. With Spanish Habsburg gold and troops in the mix, France funds from the shadows, then strides in openly by 1635. Armies quarter in villages, levy contribution. Wow, this sounds like a horrible time period. Borders bend, boots stay. All right, it's still got objective story, main character, influence character. All right, so I just want to make sure you go through it again, write it up as a typical one-page treatment for regular people to read. No Dramatica theory. And then it really should have removed that, so I'll make sure. Actually, I should probably do this. No Dramatica theory. The reception agent. Please. That'll remind me to fix that. Write up as a typical one-page treatment for regular people, no Dramatica theory. Oh, and then let's come up with the title, Brett. Right. And while it's doing that, all right, so then that would be the story where the main character is in physics and the objective story is in the universe. The other thing we can do is we can get rid of the steadfast. And instead of making the main character a doer, let's make them a beer. And that should flip the main character and influence character. So you get a little main character moved into the psychology domain. Influence character moved into the physics domain. Perfect. All right. So there, that's the difference. So now, still having that stuck sort of sense of things, but now the main character is in a manipulative state and they're being influenced by an influence character who is more physical in nature. And here you'll see it's no longer a stop story. I didn't talk about that in the other one. It's now about a start story. So one of the other aspects of a narrative is whether or not the main character is adding or beginning something or dropping or ending something. And that describes their arc through the story. So you'll see by making him more of a beer, then that sets up because of the relationship between the objective story and the main character, gives it that start dynamic. So we'll come back to that in a second. Let's see what we got here. The bridge that stayed. Okay, that's actually quite, yeah, that's very main character steadfast. All right. So midway through the 30 Years' War, the county on a cold river fork has no steady master. See, this is actually something that you could read. 1 month, Swedish bluecoats and Protestant German allies stamped the ledgers. The next, imperial troops in the Catholic League ride in with Bavarian dragoons, Spanish coin, and new seals. All right. Ooh, Matthias Amsel builds things for a living. Father Ignacio rides with a Catholic regiment. He carries a travel altar, a pouch of wax seals, and a voice that can make a checkpoint melt. He whispers new names, inks dispensations, and drills peasants in the right prayer. Where the story they expect and pass. The market town of Grimside. All right. This is great. So, like I did with last week, I'll make sure and in the community, I'll go ahead and put fun with story forms. I'll put the actual stories in here so you can read them. Bridge that stayed. I love the title. The bridge that stayed. Oh, I hope this works given what I did this morning, but let's see. Let's make a 9 by 16 streamer. Seems like a streamer thing. Or is it a book? No, let's just make it a streamer thing. Poster thumbnail for this with made up actors' names on it. Something like that. Yeah. I have a feeling though, when it comes to the poster, we'll see. It could work. Let's see, Codefinder ask. Making audience takeaway. Planning. Okay, so it's planning the poster layout. I have a feeling there's something that's not set correctly, so this might show a broken image while it's going through and doing the partial images, but let's see. All right, so again, it planned out what it's going to do. Oh, come on. Oh, that's right. I have to switch it over. Man, I didn't fix that yet. All right, hold on. My bad. Put this in encoding. Go ahead and generate cheer, please. All right. Really got to remember to do that. Let's see. Do. Dramatica. And we will set up and reception. All right. That should get that. Collecting useful examples. Should pop up here. All right. I'll come back and check on that guy. So I wanted to just talk about the difference here. So what I did is I went into the relationship of, all right, so we had this, right? For the bridge that remained. What was it called? The bridge that stayed. All right. So, yeah, that was this, the bridge that stayed. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to show you the different genre feel of when you have, again, the objective stories about that fixed conditions and everything that's going on, but the main character is more in a manipulative, or they're dealing with issues of how they think, less so of the things that they do. Right? Okay, so that's going through. And let's just see what the first is going to be broken. Am I going to get a nice little commercial thing there? And there's quite a lot of action here. Okay, come on. Very slow. All right, we'll come back to that. So let's look at examples of this. So the first one that comes to mind, completely different genre. I'm not talking war type stuff. Would be Field of Dreams. So this is a sports drama, but unlike something like The Natural or something like that, it's really about everybody's dealing with, it's like an ensemble piece where they have different episodes of things they go through, and everybody's dealing with stuff that they'd done in the past. Obviously, the big objective story is I have a cornfield in the middle of Iowa, and I'm going to build a baseball diamond in the middle of it, and that's the inequity. And then that brings up all the ghosts from the past for everybody, and they all have to deal with that stuff. So it's kind of like a fantasy sort of um, supernatural condition thing that's set up with what's his name, Ray, dealing with kind of like the way that he thinks, which is this hippy dippy sort of like, hey man, whatever works out. And then of course, Shoeless Joe and Terrence are the ones who influence him based on the things that they do. Um, which is very interesting. It's great seeing these two people. You know, they both kind of have the same perspective and they're influencing him. And then the relationship are all the memories that people are going through. So that has a different feel to it. Another one that's kind of in the same genre feel of conflict would be I think Fight Club. Isn't Fight Club? So the main character is the narrator, right? And then Tyler, nope, it's not. It's a completely different area. That was not a good example. Let's do another way we can do it is just go into here and go to Storyform connections. I can make this a universe, and then the main character domain, I can add this and set this to psychology. All right, so these are similar films. Witness. So Witness is the kid is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he's Amish, and then they're gonna go take him out, and then what's her name is actually the main character, even though Harrison Ford is the protagonist. Um, Kelly McGillis, right? Isn't that her name? Rachel. Rachel is the main character, and he's the influence character protagonist. So she's going through all the changes, changing her nature. She's gonna like leave and do all that kind of stuff. Whereas he's like 100% physics, taking control, bringing the gun into the house. And then meanwhile, it's like the kid. The kid who has all the answers is in Amish country, and then they're just gonna go take him out. So either the kid goes or the people coming after him go. Jim, subscription level you are working in. The subscription level I'm working in is it would be sorry, it's a good question. I always have it set up, obviously because I have to do all this stuff. I have it set up where I use the unlimited one. So there's like three of them, right? There's basic. Let's see, do I have it on here? I think this is going to take me here. Oh, pricing. Basic is the entry level, so you can like test it out and see um, how it works for you. Plus has the image generation, voice, has play mode, which will be coming in here once I pull subtext. And you have access to subtext, so you have all of these, both one in subtext and one in the Dramatica platform. It's just a matter of pulling over subtext. And also what we're doing is switching to a usage-based pricing so that these are roundabout numbers for right now. So 5 million, and then you get 4 times as much with Dramatica Plus. Kind of like if you just think of your cell phone bill with minutes or gas. And then Dramatica Pro is the one that I have right now, right? The other thing it has is this frontier thinking, which I've added, meaning if I go into Narrova here and I adjust the thinking, it's usually set to balanced, which is kind of like the nice midpoint between doing too much thinking and not doing enough when it goes through and where is it? When it goes through and it thinks through this stuff. Um, I have it set currently. Oh, that's the default, right? And then you can, if you're doing something that's less trying to figure out the story form and maybe just writing, or you don't need it to think so much. You could use light. Quick is like, I don't want to say dumb, but is just really fast. Does not use like latest model, and is just, I guess if you were like just brainstorming ideas and you just wanted to run through some stuff, you would want to do this. And the difference between this and chat would be chat has a little bit more, because they're trying to reach such a broad audience, it has much more social, not restrictions, but guideposts. So you have a little bit more creative freedom, at least now, in Narova here. So that, maybe if you wanted to come up with ideas, you'd switch to quick. Light. I just realized I didn't tell everybody this is in here. Yes, you can adjust the thinking now. Deliberate would be, so both basic and plus have access to this too. We'll go through and really think through it, and it's really will get you a much better answer, especially when you're story forming. It's not much better, but it will just have it'll have really thought through it, because there's a lot of stuff in a story form where it might not work quite well, and it's got to go back and make changes and think, all right, well, maybe I'll try this version and maybe I'll try this version and move all the different pieces around. to get the best story form. And then for pro users, they have the Frontier, which is essentially it's GPT-5 Pro. So super smart. But again, it's a premium just because of what goes into it. I wouldn't use it for a lot. It's extremely slow. But if you're planning out a whole story and you want it to make sense and you also want it to work in with the story form that you're working on, then you could use that. So yeah, I'm just using essentially um, the Pro, but kind of set for plus users, right? And that whole pricing usage thing by the end of October, which is really soon, we'll have a much better idea of what the usage is and how we can make that all work. So you'll get a much more defined idea of what that's like. And you can always add more. The really nice thing about that, particularly for story development, is you might just want to keep the subscription um, just so you have access to it and you can always keep up to date or if you want to make changes and stuff. But then when you're heavy into development, you might have 1 month where you need like more, so you can just buy extra chunks of it, get extra gas, um, and then go back to the one that you had before. All right, so I think I finished the image here. Yes, it's not the right format, but this is from Blackford River Pictures. The Bridge That Stayed. Hold the bridge, feed the town. I don't know whose foot is here. Is it a foot? We're gonna leave that just because that's a funny image. Um, I think somebody's foot's in the wrong place. But let's go ahead. All right, the bridge that stayed. So what I'll do again, uh, it's really easy now just to set a new story context. So I'm just going to call this the bridge that stayed. Create the story. So now we have a story context for the story that we developed. And I'm going to set this as the cover for it so that now when I go into my stories, it will have, let's go back here. If I go into the story context manager, there's the bridge that stayed, right? And then these are the other ones that I did last week. So then I can just jump right back into it. And here's the conversation. All right. So let's get back to this. All right. So that was witness as one example of that. Let's see what we had in terms of psychology. All right. So we got witness, Buffy. Let's go down to the bottom to see the newness. Oh, Barbie. So Barbie was very much like that. Barbie had two story forms. One was essentially the Greta Gerwig version of it, and then the Noah Baumbach, I think. Yes, because a single work can have two different story forms going on at once. So this is the Barbie Ken story. I think this is just Barbie goes to the real world, is the fantasy objective story. It's actually been a while since I've thought about that movie. The other one I noticed that was in here, which is really interesting, is The Abyss, where um nuclear sub goes down, aliens, and so it's not so much the things they're doing, but just that situation. Like a nuclear bomb, like Marines are coming in to take it out, or the SEALs are coming in to take it out. Who can protect the aliens? Um, and the main character there is Ed Harris, right? And he's juggling everybody in on the rig, so he's the one that's like the leader. And so it's his psychology that is being tested and his way of thinking about things, whereas his ex-wife Lindsay is just like go 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 go. And I think isn't Crimson Tide has the same essence to it, right? Am I wrong? Do I not have Crimson Tide in here? Oh, Crimson Tide right there. Yeah, it's the same thing. So this Crimson Tide and the Abyss are very similar genre-wise. Again, untenable situation, aboard a nuclear sub on the brink of nuclear war, which is kind of the same thing as the Abyss. And I think these actually came out relatively close to each other, where the main character is all about the way they think about things, and they just have a really nice balanced way of seeing everything, and they're fighting against an influence character who is just go 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 go, and that would be Gene Hackman here as the influence character, right? Like he just wants to blow everything up because he's got accurate information, and Denzel over here is like, well, what if we're wrong, right? Again, that same setup. And I know in this one he's steadfast. These are all these older sort of subtext terms, but steadfast. And I think the same thing is in the Abyss. Yeah, steadfast. Okay. So these two are really close in genre. And I just seem I know them better than some of the other ones that are here. The Menu is a really good one too. That one's more scary horror like, where everybody's been brought to an island. So that's another way to think of universe objective story. Like Lord of the Flies, that's a really classic one. Uh, this everybody's been brought, they're trapped, they're not leaving, and then she has a way of Margot has a way of thinking. Her social class is much lower than everybody else, kind of like streetwise. Um, whereas everybody else is kind of more uppity, rich. And then the chef here is both influence character and antagonist. Chef Slowick, who has brought everybody together and is taking action to kind of find some peace and to make up for some bad reviews he got in the past. So that is another way of looking at that. So these have much more, whereas the one that I did before, The Bridge That Stayed, has a much more kind of set, more in conflicting sort of thing between everybody. This one has more of a lightness toward between the objective story and the main character. So maybe I would do something. Let's see. And then the other one is Crimson Tide and the Abyss. All right, so let's go back to the Storyform Builder. I'm gonna flip. Actually, let's go ahead and just copy this. Let's go do a new story. Make sure I clear out that context. All right, so let's go back to story forming. All right, working on another story. And it's weird because it's like, all right, well, why do you write so many stories? But it's almost like this is the thing I've been thinking where there's like a new medium where it's just being able to engage in narrative with the intelligence is almost the entire experience itself. So it's actually kind of a fun way to engage your own imagination while building a story. So I'm working on another story. Okay, this one I want to try completely different genre that I haven't tried before. Something a little more fantastical and maybe supernatural, where it has the feeling or the genre setup of the following story form. So again, those domains set the genre, the personality of the story. So I have universe and mind, main character and psychology and physics. I'm gonna pull out the signposts so we don't get too much stuff like that. Um, you know, throw out three completely different story ideas. this story form so I can think about um, exploring this space of narrative. Let's see what it comes up with. Yeah, because in the past I would just, all right, let me think of something that's like the Abyss and kind of like Crimson Tide and come up with a new thing. What's another nuclear downed F-35 in the middle of the Ukraine or something like that? Instead, let's go to the more fantastical side of things. I probably should have said modern day, but maybe that's not. All right, let's see what sort of ideas it comes up with. And then I will quickly do the mind one. So while it's coming up with those ideas, and I'll come back to that in a second, the last thing I wanted to do today is to go over the mind domain. So that one you rarely see in Western narratives, especially nowadays. And that's because, oh, let me get over here. I should just reset the whole thing. And that's because um, when you have an objective story where it's about people's fixed attitudes, uh, you usually you usually present that either in a play or a musical. By virtue of the what is this reset? Just by virtue of what it is that you're exploring, people's attitudes and ambitions and drives, it's much more, it's easier to get across in a novel, in a play, or in a musical. People can sing about it, they can talk about it, they can have soliloquies, they can be on the stage and kind of express where they're coming from. So you'll find that a lot of the objective stories here, uh, or I'm sorry, a lot of the stories that have an objective story set in mind are in those mediums. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And medium doesn't always define genre. Medium doesn't always define genre. Yeah, and genre doesn't define the medium. It's easier. That's why like putting the objective story in physics, that's why film usually is there because it's a physical medium. It's visual. Whereas this is the play is much more cerebral, novel. So we'll come back to that. Let's see what they have in Narrova here. All right, so this is going back to the city of stolen summers. Every summer has vanished from the seaside city of Osprey Cove since a pact made by its founding families. The city is trapped in a foggy, unending shoulder season, tourism dead, crops failing, temper souring, as a consortium of season keepers hoard the stolen summers for themselves. Oh. And the main character is a grief counselor who copes by reframing and masking. Their conflict stems from internal processes. This is so weird. I feel like this is an actual thing. That's really good. A migratory season spirit in human guise actively steals back artifacts, climbs bell towers, ruptures wards. Whoa, that one's awesome. All right, Salt Bridge Accord. Generations ago, the cliffside village of Nareth sealed a bridal treaty with the Storm Mother. These all have the same sort of feel to them. In exchange for safe harbors, one bride of salt is chosen each cycle to live at the lighthouse and keep the goddess appeased. Why does this all have a C? But it seems like something weirdly interesting. Yeah. Why do these have a C thing to it? This has a C thing to it. All right. The Night Archive. A celestial bureaucracy called the Archivists binds the metropolis to an unalterable ledger of lives. That seems too much. Every citizen's future decision. Man, I feel like it does a lot of the same thing with auditors and ledgers. Wasn't that? Yeah, last week was a ledger. All right, so we're going to do number one. I absolutely love number one. I'm actually going to jump ahead and do story reception. I love number one so much. Go ahead and write it up as a one pager. The log line, no dramatic theory. Write it engaging and entertaining for uh, audiences. Make it effortless to read. And then I'll do the image afterwards. All right, so it'll go off and do that. And then let me jump back to our thing about mind. All right, so this is an objective story in mind, which again I was saying is more apt for plays and stuff. Let me show you. Get rid of that guy, this guy, this guy. So if I go up to the top here and I switch this so that we put the objective story in mind, like you'll see these are plays, novels, probably used to be a play, novel, play, play, Rear Window that has a play aspect to it. To Kill a Mockingbird, greatest novel of the 20th century. Splendor in the Grass. So you can see these have very, whereas the universe stories were very contained physically, these are very contained mentally. The other thing that works really well for these would be courtroom dramas, because the objective story is usually about whether or not somebody is guilty or not guilty. So it's those attitudes. So you'll see 12 Angry Men, A Few Good Men, that kind of stuff. Separation, that's fantastic. Zootopia. So this would be an example where an animated film, which is almost always an objective story in physics, this one was really looking at the prejudices as the core of what the argument is, or at least the conflict that's in there. Doubt, another play. Bronx Tale, another play. So you can see A Few Good Men. Oh, this one's great. Hamilton, musical. Thinking of Ending Things. Where is Macbeth is a play. Tick Tick Boom. So Tick Tick Boom and Hamilton are almost the same. Past Lives has a very play sort of feel to it. All right. But you'll see here, this again, this would be the outlier. Oppenheimer. So, the objective story, even though they're doing things physically, it's not like they're having difficult doing the things, but it's really about all the memories that come up and not being able to recognize what it is that you're working on. That is the focus of um the film, the creation and fallout of the atomic weapon, almost like a reflection on everything. And that's what's going on here. Yeah, lots of holistic stories in mind. It's difficult to externalize mind unless it's a musical, and novels excel at interiority. Yeah, those are both really, really good points. So we'll make this a play. Um, so while I'm looking at generating the image here, if anybody has any ideas for settings for the play, we'll get to that in a second. So, City of Stolen Summers, in a fog-choked seaside city that traded away its summers, a grief counselor who keeps life tidy teams with a reckless season spirit to steal back the warm months before Osprey Cove whispers into permanent gray. All right, it's really cool. Wonderful. Go ahead and generate. I guess I would make this. Is this a novel? Yeah, generally book cover, very summer, easy reading novel. Something that could be read over a weekend. Um, you know, lying on the beach. Something that would be at the top of the NT, and that would be at the top. Seller for August. Let's make it July. Um, all right. So that should go off and do that. All right. So let's go back to our objective story here. Okay. All we've picked is the main character, and I'm going to go ahead and set this. I'm going to make the main character a doer, which again, because they're seeking solutions externally, their domain of conflict will be external activity, so stuff that they're doing. So this is the setup for um, Hamilton and for Tick Tick Boom, Macbeth, where you have ambition is like what everybody's, that's the focus of it, the drives and dreams and ambitions. And then very specifically, the doing of that drive, that ambition. And then meanwhile, they're being challenged here. So then the relationship story in a story, when you have the objective story domain in mind, to balance it out, the relationship story then would be about universe, which is usually, you'll find it's people and their labels or their relative states. Like A Few Good Men, with him and Demi Moore, it's with Tom Cruise, and it, not only man woman, which is really clear, but also, she's his superior officer and he's here. So their relationship is about those labels. Who's on top of who. Same thing with Doubt, has that same thing where it's like priest and nun, man, woman, that sort of thing that they're exploring. So let's copy this. Let's go back and look at our image. Is it right? Oh, yeah. See, I do have to, and it's because I did some rollouts here. So it still have this like broken image thing, but once the image is finished, it'll pop in, and then we should be able to. Can I? Cannot do that. We'll be able to take our um, image. Yeah. So perfect beach read. This is exactly what I thought. City of Stolen Summers. Wonderful. And it's a perfect beach read. So I will make this, what is it? City of Stolen Summers. All right. So new story context. City of Stolen Summers. I'm going to create that story. And then I'm going to set this as the cover. So I'll just tap this, set that as the story cover. All good. And you'll see there's elements. What's great about doing the images here is it'll take images of it'll take storytelling from the development of it and make sure that's a part of the actual image there. Okay. So let's go and do a new story here. So I did new, but you'll notice it's still got the context set to City of Stolen Summers. So you just want to make sure you clear that out. And let's go to auto. Let's do Storyform. All right. So prejudices and labels in our present days, same-sex relationship. Okay. Oh, for the relationship story. So let's do that. I'm even going to go ahead and set one of the aspects that I don't usually do in this stuff is the main character's problem solving style, which in Dramatica is this idea of, when it comes to resolving inequities, is the main character somebody who's cause and effect? Like, I see this, and then if I do this, I'm going to get this. I have my plans, and I go through it. Or if there's somebody who is balancing context in relationships. So just for fun, I'm actually going to set that ahead of time. And what that does is that really sets the signpost into motion. I bet if I come over here, it's already set. Like I said, this might be 85% accurate, but just by setting the holistic and by virtue of the kind of story we're trying to tell, that's already locked into place. So, and that just has a lot to do with the fact that when it comes to Dramatica theory, it's not completely balanced. Everything is, 50% here, and then over here it's 50%. Things are not always 180 degrees from each other. There could be something that's like 90 degrees this way, and then the other one's like 270 degrees this way. So there's all kinds of craziness that goes on. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go here, but I just want um, Narrova to know about this. So, okay, I am a playwright. No, I'm writing a musical. What are we doing? Let's do a musical. I'm writing a musical where I'm interested in exploring same-sex relationship and the prejudices and labels in our present day. And I'm just taking this from Let There Be Conflict here. I want to use this story form. So I'm going to pop this here. I'm going to get rid of the signpost, even though it has the whole thing there. Do I want to do that? Let's see. Actually, I'm going to keep all those signposts there. Let's see. In a small town. Okay, let's set it in a small town. Anything else before I set it off? Set it in a small town, present day. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have it use the signpost so that it'll be able to go through and write. Actually, what I'll do first, just to keep it kind of clean so there's not too much information, I want to cut this out for right now. Let's set it in a small town. I really want to focus in on the relationship through line. So the OS isn't that important to me, but the MC and IC and definitely the RSR. So I'm going to really turn up the dial on the relationship story. Let's set it in an exotic country somewhere. And then are we doing male, male, female, female? What are we doing? Doing both? In some exotic country. It's an exotic country somewhere. Maybe give us 3 different options for the location and or major players. Okay. So this will be very different from 30 Days War, 30 Years War, than the beach, the kind of fantastical beach summer thing. And now we're doing a musical. It's very basic idea, just same-sex relationship in an exotic country. And let's see where it lands. Exploring options is always the best. Okay. So yeah, it knows kind of the general direction I want to take things and exploring queer love in exotic settings. So let's see what it comes up with. Doing a lot of thinking. It's considering some exotic locations, then exploring relationship dynamics and settings, defining universe constraints and themes. All right. A contemporary musical centered on a same-sex relationship with prejudice labels in the background, while we foreground main character, influence character, and especially the relationship through line. Great. And then it's going to go through and offer 3 small town exotic settings that are in that headspace. All right. Your lead tackles problems by taking action, rescuing, building, traveling, or fixing. The influencer challenges how people perform or reshape identity, play roles, or manipulate narratives. So you can kind of remember that from the 30 Years War, that kind of relationship between main character and influence character. All right, their conflict springs from a concrete external situation that boxes them in: paperwork, geography, inheritance, duty, or living arrangement. Okay, while the Main story is community prejudice and labeling are the weather system that everyone breathes. All right, so we have 3 small town options. Aegean micro island in Greece. The island's ferry shuts down for the winter. Housing scarcity forces the leads into a year-long co-tenancy clause tied to a grant. Oh, that's interesting. Nikos would be a volunteer Coast Guard deckhand who literally saves people. Elias, a visiting choreographer staging the island's first inclusive dance festival. He challenges how the town performs tradition and how Nikos performs masculinity. Okay. A town councilor who equates order with conformity. She weaponizes labels to keep funding and respectability. Oh, that's nice. Okay, musical tent poles. Oh, cool. Opening, The Weather of Words, Rope and Wake. Who knows if these songs are any good. All right, so that's one. Option B, Chilote Palafitos. Oh, in Chile. All right, the lovers co-inherit a decaying palafito with a clause. Neither can sell unless both live there for 4 seasons and restore it to code. This I'd love. Main character is Tomas, a muscle diver and fixer. He attacks problems with carpentry, tides, and sweat, while as Raphael, an urban chef curating a pop-up that reimagines Chilote identity. I can already see this working. The antagonistic force, a preservation activist who believes real Chiloe excludes queer visibility. She polices authentic. Yeah, I love this. 4 seasons under one roof. I don't know if that's a good song. Kiso Valley Timber Town. Ooh. Yeah, I agree. Japanese Alps. The local shrine's centuries old Firewatch Rota binds the two as paired guardians after a temple accident. Duty schedules, curfews, and shared watchtower quarters create a fixed. So it's really playing up the fact that their relationship is based on the condition that they are stuck with each other, which when usually they wouldn't be, but because of that, that's how their relationship grows. Haru, a mountain rescue rigger who solves by rigging, hauling. Okay. Sora, a non-binary no apprentice experimenting with masks and maha. They challenge how the town performed. This was really cool too. A merchant guild elder who insists labels preserve harmony. This is a strong number 2, but I'm going to go with the Chile one. They are all really, really great. Yeah, and you can see they all kind of have the same sort of feel to them, personality feel to them. Totally different than the 30 Years' War, totally different than um, the seaside one, but yet still have a integrity to them, a thematic integrity that feels like a complete narrative. So, okay, we really love the second one. Yeah, and I agree. I love Chile because it's not so used. That's kind of why I like the Japanese one too, because I don't feel like I've ever seen that. Greece and Love Affairs is kind of cliche, totally. All right, so we really love the second one. So let's go with that. Um, Go ahead and, because it's holistic, go ahead and write up um, a detailed look at each of the 4 through lines. And then after you do that, go ahead and sketch out what happens in each through line using signpost progressions, which are already set like this. Let's do 1 through line at a time first, in the order of RS, then MC, then IC, and then OS. Okay. Yeah. Let's do that. Oh, I probably should have. Yeah, that's fine. Maybe switching this to encoding would have been better, but let's just go ahead and do this. It's been an hour and a half. I try to keep these down, but it's Dramatica. It takes a while to do something good. I could do 5-minute videos, but then what's the point? You might as well use ChatGPT. All right, proposing concern options. I don't need that. I just need you to go through, story form this, and then we'll get a good poster for it. I'm sure hopefully it'll end up with, it's interesting because, and again, I'm pretty sure this is accurate, but there should be some difference, but we'll see. We'll just go with the flow here. Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah. Because to me, it's like, it's almost, the joy is less about, oh, don't do that. No, no, no. That might fail. Um, yeah, the joy is actually developing and making it, not so much. I have a feeling that will actually break. So it's going into way greater detail, which I did not want it to do. Yeah. Oh, oh, okay. That's working. All right. Can love grow when duty, roof, and law hold us in place? Oh, whoa, it's doing way too much. It kind of jumped to conclusions here. Um, let's see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it broke down. No, 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 no. Wow. So within each signpost, there are beats here, which is when it was doing that story beat breakdown. So it's actually going through and doing sequences. Um, the only thing is there's way too much detail. Okay. It did way too much, but that's okay. Let's do reception. And for right now, let's hold off on breaking down this signposts into so much detail. Right now, we just want a nice, let's do 2-page treatment, going over the story itself while focusing on the relationship story through line. Um, this is going to be a musical, but you can hold off on actually calling out the songs themselves. We're really just looking at the story and the kind of conflicts that are at play. Now you must sing in Spanish. But you can roll off actually kind of it's not, or we're really just looking at the story for now. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Did it have a title? I don't think so. A title that is distinctly Chilean. Um, yeah. So what it did, I thought it was going to break, but because the holistic ones, I do have those worked out, it did actually go through and break down, how are we doing is the first act. And then through that, there's going to be fact, security, threat, and fantasy. So that would likely be the fact of their situation, how they're brought together. Um, and then, well, I don't know if this is right. This could be right. But the idea overall is, their condition is changing, then focusing on, okay, what can we do right now? Then that brings up what brought us here. And then in the end, focusing on the future. So hopefully it kind of pulls back on the detail there. We'll come back and yeah, season by season arc. Whoa. Okay. Madeira y Marea. Did it change the names? Oh. In Castro, where stilted palafitos bite into the tide like teeth, a will lands on a wooden table. Two names in careful ink, Tomas and Rafael. The house sits on posts at the waterline, shingles scabbed with salt, kitchen leaning like a shoulder after a hard day. The clause is simple and stubborn. Live here to oh, that's right, for 4 seasons. Restore the palafito to code. Sell only if both agree. Tomas smells of rope and diesel. He dives for mussels at dawn and patches hulls by noon. Rafael steps off the bus from Santiago with knives wrapped in linen and an apron folded like a letter. The two men sign, each gripping the pen as if it were an oar. Oh, thank you for the translation. Wood and tide. I actually really love that. Their first days are all creeks and boundaries. They chalk a line down the plank floor, his side, then erase it because the stove sits in the middle and nobody can cook on rules. All right, let's get to the antagonists. Around them, the town names and sorts. A preservation activist, Doña Elvira, circles in a wool shawl and a fixed smile, guarding a notion of authentic that stops at their doorstep. This street is for postcards, she says, tapping a post as if it were a drumhead. A flipper, Ivan, idles his truck by the water and flicks a business card through the air. Cash now, no waiting, no inspection. The choir of neighbors watches from balconies. Fishermen with nets like wedding veils, a clerk eating sopapilas from a greasy paper, cousins on a stoop who whisper and grin, labels collect like kelp on a rope, roommates, partners from here, from away. In Castro, this is Let There Be Conflict. In Castro, they have a tradition to move houses in community. It's called Pinga, the moving of the house. That's great. It's actually really, really good. Thank you so much for being here. Spring brings light and a checklist. Permits, inspections, a ledger with costs in red ink. Doña Elvira posts flyers for a pure festival that frames tradition like a bell jar. Well, this is beautiful. Do they get together at the end? Let's see. Mm, Night drops slow. The house stands straight on new legs, post dark and wet. Inside, chairs scrape, friends laugh, an old song lives in a new throat. Outside, the tide rises and kisses the steps. Two men lean against the frame and watch the water climb. They don't explain what they are to anyone on the pier. They live here, they keep the window open. They let the tide in as far as the boards allow. Whoa, that's amazing. All right. Love the title. Let's go ahead and generate a 16 by 9 poster for this musical. Um, you know, make it look like it's at a local theater, Chile. Um, uh, you know, fictional news and the musicians behind the music. Switches to encoding. All right. Oh, let's do story context. Oh, what is it? It's Madeira y Marea. Whoops. Did I set that? New story context. Okay. Madeira y Marea. Did I get that right? Hold on. Madeira y Marea. Okay. Okay. And then let's go ahead and make the poster. Worldwide. It's not always AI robots and sci-fi here. We actually have queer love in Chile. Hopefully you can see it just worked out nicely because yeah, for sure, you know, when you're dealing with that subject matter, I guess the easy way is, prejudices and fixed attitudes and stuff, but then you'll want the relationship to be bound by some sort of fixed external state. And in this case, they're both tied to this house, which is like that universe thing that they're trying to deal with. And then whether or not they can, work their way through it. Or, And in the end, they stay stuck to it. That's part of their future, right? Like if I go to the signpost here, the way it is now, in the end, you know, it's all about their future life there, and nobody can tell them what to do. And you'll see like here, I'm assuming this is correct, but the first act will be all about people's immediate responses like, oh no, you can't live here, and trying to buy the house right away, and then moving into more conscious considerations of what's going on, then go into people's drives and desires. So like here you'll have the fear, anger, love will come into play, and then finally all the recollections in the end. Queer love in Chiloe is quite something than queer love in Santiago. Oh, is that what it says up here? No. All right. So again, I gotta fix this thing so that these images look right. But once it's finished, it'll pop up. So hopefully that gives everybody a really good idea of how much fun it is to just write stories and explore narrative with Narrova and the Storyform Builder, and the idea that you can switch between genres just using the Storyform Builder here, which Narrova has access to, so you can ask it questions about that. And if there's some aspect here that you're not quite sure about, or you want to try out different options, and then you can just copy whatever state that the story form is now and just paste it into Narrova. And once you have a complete story form, then you can just attach that to the story and have that all set into place. But yeah, here we go. That looks great. Un musical chile, casa, dos hombres que deciden quedarse. There you go. Beautiful. I'm gonna set that as a story cover. It's funny, I actually wanted it to be vertical, but I actually like this way better. And there's a QR code if you want to come learn more about the musical. All right, and it has music by Diego Sanfuentes. That's totally a house in Castro. Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I would never have gone to this place if it wasn't for um, Victoria here. So thank you so much. So that'll do it for today's live stream. It's funny. The more fun I have, the less people are here, but that's okay. Yeah, so this will be part two. I will definitely put both stories, the complete stories, into the community so you can always read. It's probably a lot easier to read on the community, along with the posters and their story form settings. And until then, I will see everybody next week, same time, same channel. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, I enjoy them too. It's really, really, really fun. Yeah, and we'll have more to talk about next week. Everybody have a wonderful week. And as always, if you had questions, you can leave them down below. You can do the like button. You can do the subscribe thing. Tell everybody about it. Tell them how cool Narova is. And we'll just keep writing really great stories. Thanks, everybody.